Wait, before the video starts, please subscribe. I'm desperate. And leave a comment about literally anything. Just say the word whales if you don't know what to. If you get mad at me, because over the course of this video, I am going to be bashing on communism, just later leave a comment and I'll be more than happy to tell you all the many ways in which you're wrong. Anyways, let's set the scene. The air is cold, freezing even. Icebergs float past, and a fog has set in. You've been on a tiny ship at sea, constantly tossed around by churning waves. You're sick, you're tired, and you're done with this. It's been weeks, maybe months. You've completely lost track of time. Finally, out in the distance, you see it. The fleshy mass pokes out of the water for no more than an instant. Full ahead, you and your crew rush forward. You sit and wait, scanning the horizon for hours. You've almost given up when suddenly you feel your boat begin to tremor. No more than a dozen feet to your side, a massive leviathan splits the waves. This tosses you to the side, and you scramble to your harpoon. You throw it as hard as you can. It's launched, digging into the side of the beast. This massive whale panics and dives into the depths of the abyss, your harpoon dragging your boat with it. You are now stranded and alone in an ice-cold sea, left to nothing but the mercy of the elements. This is how many whaling trips would end. But first, let's start at the beginning. People from places like Japan all the way to Greenland across the Arctic have been whaling for centuries, using whales for fuel, buildings, food, etc. If you know about places in the United States like the Navajo, how they would use the bison, imagine whales as like the bisons of the great northern seas. These products would change over time, and as commercial hunters began, they would really only use them for oil, as it was cheap and the most efficient natural oil that there is. They would also use whalebone, which, despite the name, isn't actually whale's bones, it's baleen, this thing that would trap different little fishes or plankton that a whale could then eat. This would be used in a lot of materials, everything from corsets to utensils. Around the 16th century, the Basque people, which is in between Spain and France, were the first people to actually start commercially whaling, and they made a lot of money off of its backs. The only issue is, very quickly, they realized there's not enough whales in their little bay to support this massive whaling operation. So they began to spread out, moving north and into the Atlantic. As they went on, and people realized how much money this was making the Basque people, other nations began to join in whaling. One of the biggest ones is the Dutch. If you know about the Dutch, you know already how they have this massive fleet, and pretty much all of their empire was based around the ocean. So very quickly, they got very good at whaling. They would go up to places in the northern Atlantic or Arctic, all the way up to places like Svalbard, I probably butchered that name, and they would keep running out of whales. So they would need to keep expanding and expanding the area that they're searching for whales in. Over time, later nations who have bigger fleets, like the English, and then much further down the line, the Americans, were able to outcompete and take over the whaling trade from the Dutch. The Dutch, English, and Americans all had many colonies surrounding the entire globe. And this means it went from just a little whaling operation where the Basque people live to, over the span of the next couple hundred years, up to like the 1800s, it's able to completely go across the world, where it went from only certain kinds of whales in the North Atlantic. Now, if you're a whale anywhere on Earth, it's going to be a very bad time for you. Initially, people would first hunt bowhead whales for a number of reasons. Number one, they're just very slow, so it's not that difficult to hit them with a harpoon. And second of all, once you actually kill it, it would float to the top, which is very important. You don't want to spend how many weeks, months trying to catch a whale, just finally you get one, spend hours to days fighting it just for you to kill it, and it sinks to the bottom of the sea. By the 1800s, it had mostly changed from bow-headed whales to sperm whales. Because bowhead whales had that kind of whalebone that was very valuable. Sperm whales do not, they just have normal teeth. So you're missing out on that valuable resource, but sperm whales have much more and better quality oil. So this is going to be a point where it really is just about oil. In the past, it had been there multiple facets of a whale that you can use. Now it's just focusing on getting that sweet, sweet oil. And naturally, America was at the head of this. In that 1800s, early 1900s period, we saw massive urbanization and industrialization. So there's so many more people moving into big cities. Now they need a lot more oil for lights, and you're going to see more and more whales being killed because of that. As well as the Industrial Revolution really beginning to kick off, and eventually the Second Industrial Revolution kicking off, that you need lubricants for your machines and engines, and whale oil is the perfect thing for that. But when you start looking at the numbers, you're going to see around this point, whaling is going to start to take a massive dip. Why is that? It's because just in general, you couldn't find as many whales anymore. And when you could, it's still this massive, long, hard fight that most of the time, or many times, like I was saying in the introduction, would just lead with the entire crew dying. It just wasn't worth it anymore to keep trying to kill these whales. So you're going to see the numbers start to dip. And this is around the time when whaling stopped. Or it would have stopped at least if there wasn't one man from Scandinavia who invented the harpoon gun. And this was a complete and utter game changer. It went from whaling is this long, dangerous expedition, and it has taken 350 years just for people to be able to kill, what, a couple tens of thousands of whales? To now that the harpoon gun's invented, it's like, yeah, we could kill a couple tens of thousands of whales, just give us a few days. That, along with the industrialization, allowing whales to be cleaned, cut, refined so much easier and quicker, it was only less than 4% the time it took to process a whale that it had in 1920 than it had in 1850. Because now you have these massive ships with large capabilities that are able to clean, cut, refine, process, hunt, and then dispose of any parts of the whale that they don't need all by itself before they even get back to land. And like I was saying, this single-handedly makes whaling viable again. But the issue is, by the 1920s, people started to realize they're killing a dumb amount of whales, like a ton of whales. And they're starting to realize around this time, whales aren't what they thought they were. In earlier times, they thought whales were just like big fish, that they were mystical, magical monsters that needed to be killed and dealt with. Well, in this time, whales had been hunted for so long, so efficiently, now people were actually able to learn what whales are and see them firsthand once they get caught and killed. And they realize these aren't these massive kinds of monsters, these are just animals, and smart ones at that. So by the 1920s, you're going to see nations start saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't kill as many whales. Granted, whaling continues and the rates increase, to the point where you get around the 1940s to 50s post-World War II, where there are organizations made to try to limit whaling. It doesn't work very well, but they're made. People are starting to take notice of, hey, maybe we shouldn't kill all of the whales. That's probably not a good idea. And especially around this time, when you're getting into the mid-1900s, whaling is completely and utterly inefficient. Fuel sources have been taken over by oil that you get from the ground. If you need a lubricant, you can use seed oils, which are cheap and mass-producible. So in general, the whales just aren't used anywhere. Even for protein, for food, now you have massive cattle farms that they just have no real use in advanced society. This is going to come to a head when you start having television, documentaries, record players, books are all going to massively explode when you get to this time where now people are making documentaries about the whales. And people, the average citizen, is able to realize, hey, these are just animals and they're smart ones. They're more like us than we thought. So they're going to start pushing that they shouldn't do that anymore. They shouldn't keep whaling to the same extent. And eventually, there's going to be the whale songs that begin to get released. And this is a massive change where people hear these beautiful, complex ways that whales are communicating with each other, and they just start feeling empathy for them. And then at that point, it's too late. People are pressuring the government, it's no longer efficient, and then by 1986, whaling is going to be more or less outlawed across the world, so that there are only 3 nations today that allow whaling of any sort. If you want to go more in depth about the story I've talked about so far, you can look at the channel The Present Past, and they have a very good video called The Worst Hunt in History that goes very, very in-depth about this history and stretches it out way more than I ever could, so check that out. However, there is one main fact that nobody ever really touches on, and it's probably the most important fact when you're trying to understand the context of what's going on, and it is who kept whaling / why did whaling continue. And by post-World War II, there were only really 2 nations that kept whaling. That is Japan and the USSR. Japan had a number of reasons that post-World War II they were whaling. Number 1, they were broke. Their entire nation had been burnt to the ground, literally. And Japan is a very small spot. They don't have massive cattle farms. They don't have a lot of ways to get protein. So killing a lot of whales is one way that they could really do that and get a lot of protein quick, since of course whales are so massive with so much meat. Also, like I was saying in the beginning, Japan was one of the first nations to hunt whales, and it had been deeply ingrained in their culture for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So it makes sense Japan kept killing them. But by the time you're getting around to the 1970s, Japan's really gonna stop killing nearly as many whales. They're still gonna kill more than most Western nations, but not nearly as much as they had in the past, because now they're rich and they can import foreign protein. This just leaves the Soviet Union, and why did they keep killing whales? Now, this is due to a number of reasons. It's unknown, as the Soviets were very, very, very bad at reporting the actual number of whales killed. Usually they would overshoot it by thousands and thousands of whales, and even they recognized this fact. But in general, by the time most nations had stopped whaling, by around the 1980s, they had about half, if not most, of all whales killed globally. They would kill anywhere from the high 40s to low 60s in general of the entire whales killed across the world. Now, of course, you're asking, why is this? This is because they had 2 main issues. And this is going to be the part where I really start dogging on communism, because their system was so incredibly stupid, it almost killed all of the whales. They single-handedly almost drove them to extinction because of this. First of all, their economy is completely planned out by the government. The citizens are given quotas, how many things they need to do. If that's a coal mine, how much coal you need to mine. And if that's whaling, how many whales you need to kill. And this means that the amount needed, the amount that the people want, doesn't have an effect on how much is produced. Plus, they have an idea, I can't really pronounce the name, I'm just going to put it up on screen. And this is that people should work to overproduce. In a planned economy, this makes absolutely no sense. Why would you make more of something than you need? That is a waste of money to make it, and then you're just going to throw it out. It's a complete terrible idea all around. So, because they had these main issues, around the 1920s, the Soviets, they wanted to show, oh yeah, we're cool, we're one of the big empires, we're like the rest of you. And they were like, They were looking to see, well, what are all these other countries doing? We got to show that we're big and strong like them. They looked at the UK. They looked at France, the United States. What are they all doing? They're all whaling on massive scales. So the Soviets join in, and they're like, hey guys, we're cool too. We're whaling now. Look at us, we're so good at it. The issue is, because it's planned, they just keep whaling to the point where in the 60s, the United States, Britain, all of these different places had more or less stopped whaling completely. Of course, they had little people, but it's mostly going out there for sport, not for economy, because oil had completely replaced it. People no longer wanted whale oil, so it gets replaced, and they stop whaling, and whales stop being killed by them. But the Soviets don't have that same issue. They just keep killing the whales anyway. So it gets to the point where the Soviets are just going out there, just killing whales in the thousands and not using them because nobody wants them anymore. Because why would they? Because this planned economy is so incredibly stupid. They're just getting resources nobody wants for no reason. And so they just kill the whales and then dump the oil, dump the meat, dump the whale bones, dump everything back into the ocean. So they just went to a place, spent a ton of money to kill a whale just to dump it back in. So they're destroying their own economy, they're destroying the environment, they're hurting everybody and doing literally nothing. It is so incredibly dumb. Versus capitalist countries didn't have this because capitalism actually makes sense because they actually make and produce what people want. They're not doing shit for no reason and just killing a ton of whales because they want to, because of the fuck of it. Like, and this offers a very easy diversion point where we can just say either A, the Soviets don't agree to what the rest of them signed in 1986 to stop whaling, that they just keep whaling anyway, or, like in our own timeline, they still have massive illegal whaling operations anyway, and whales were extremely critically endangered around this time. So if the Soviets keep whaling, even if they reduce the amount, if they just keep going, whales are destined to go extinct. And this is going to provide a massive issue, as nations like Norway, Iceland, and especially Japan are going to be very, very, very pissed at the Soviet Union about this, because they all have whaling deeply ingrained in their culture. Now that there are no more whales, you're aiming at ruining their cultures. And you're going to have other Western nations like the United States extremely mad at this for the morality reason that they just killed thousands of animals that are incredibly smart and just like people for no reason. This is going to lead to an absolute spike in global tensions, and you're likely going to see more Japanese and American patrols around that kind of North Pacific area where most of the Soviet whaling occurred. This is going to lead to the Soviets, of course, matching that and sending in their own patrols. This could lead to a situation much like the cod war of our own timeline, where Britain and Iceland both wanted cod around Iceland. They both sent out a lot of patrols to that area and created a lot of skirmishes and conflict. And all we need is one person on any side from Japan, America, or Russia to just fire one singular shot. And because tensions are so high, this will almost definitely create a major global crisis, and likely, if not handled absolutely perfectly, if any little thing goes wrong, lead to World War III. Of course, this is the worst case scenario. If I'm being more realistic here, they would probably just put on a lot more sanctions, have an easy propaganda win in the West. They can just say, the Soviets killed all the whales, they're not the good guys, and the Soviets really can't do anything to combat that because it's true. And you're likely going to see more proxy wars between nations that are very upset that the Soviets killed all the whales, nations that rely on it, and you're probably going to see a quicker defeat of the Soviets in the Cold War due to this in the least extreme scenario. But all the whales are killed, so it's not worth it. And this is how a couple of guys with sharp sticks could have caused World War III and the end of the world as we know it. In conclusion, communism sucks. It almost killed all the whales. Good night, everybody.